Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So hello.
Hi, Heather. Hi.
To start off with, would you like to say your name and where you are?
I'm Nicole Chew-Helbig, and I'm currently in Singapore, Southeast Asia, Singapore. Yeah. And
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So the first question for you is, who are you? Who are you as a human being? And that can be anything about your values, your passions, your interests, or qualities about yourself, whatever you'd like to say.
Who am I? Um, hmm, Interesting. Um, I don't know. I think it's better to talk about the field that I'm in. I guess that's how probably I can define myself. Um, I'm a Gestalt therapist now, and I'm working and living in Singapore. Um, I'm a Singaporean, and I only moved back to Singapore a year ago. So right now, as a person, I'm still like feel as though I'm finding my ground, which is finding my home, which is kind of related to where I'm actually am right now, location wise, because I'm in between moving houses, and for this next 40 days, I'll be living in a hotel. So this is the a part of the hotel, the quiet place in the hotel, and so this has been my um, existence. I think this finding home for me. Um, Prior to last year, prior to coming back to Singapore last year, I was living in Austria, and I had been living in Austria for 15 years. And I can thank Austria a lot because it was my time in Austria that got me aware of Gestalt therapy. And also, I did a training in Gestalt therapy in Austria. And I've been living and working there for 15 years. And then I came back in 2019, back to Singapore. And since I've been back, it's been quite interesting for me because the country where I grew up in, which is Singapore, has changed. It changed. It's a kind of a very dynamic place, so it's changed quite a bit in the last 15 years. So
Hmm.
yeah, so coming back home, I'm also feel like a different person, even though um, it's home. So it's home in a new country. And 2019 was a strange year because shortly after COVID happened, and then the city changed again. So we had like from a bustling financial center turn into suddenly very quiet, and I've never seen the city that quiet. It's only in the last couple of months that things have come back to life. So it's been for me a thing about adjusting. So who am I as a person also changes with what's going on in the field.
Hmm. That
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
And it sounds like there's a lot of movement. So
right.
I am curious, even, in different places, what have you discovered about yourself that you would say are some of your values that are central wherever you are?
Um, what I know about myself is that I try to be truthful to myself. I think that's for me very important. And the truth is sometimes so elusive and difficult. And it's a struggle for me often to balance between being truthful and being accepted, this feeling. And throughout these years, I'm actually a really private person. So I don't say I have a big circle of um, company of friends. I don't really work in big groups. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So I'm what was I saying already?
Sorry, I'll just cut this little bit out. The
Yeah.
the question was a little bit about who are you and
As,
what values have stayed with you in the different places that you've been, of what you've discovered are sort of like your central values.
Yeah, yeah. So being a private, a relatively private person, I tend to I say be more of an observer, and it has been always very important for me, the concept of inclusion. Um, yeah, so perhaps it's for me being a Singaporean. As Singaporeans, we are kind of multicultural by nature. Singapore is an island basically of immigrants. So I've always lived in a multicultural kind of society. As a child, we were very much aware of culture, different cultures and races and religions. However, it was never an issue. We just played together and studied together. And that is for me really important. And it's also for us in Singapore very important. Harmony as with different races and peoples. So that I kind of take with me throughout my life. Um, my family as well. I mean, I'm not 100% Chinese. I'm Peranakan Chinese, which is Chinese immigrant family that came into Singapore from China to Southeast Asia in the 17th century. So I'm Southeast Asian basically, and on my mother's side, they're half European. So I myself come from a mixed cultural heritage, and my husband is German. So I've always been in a circle of people who are from different backgrounds, and very much integrated in them. So in a way, I feel connected and yet not in this big groups. So belonging and not belonging. This has always been a theme for me, and I feel so important that we have integration, um, and we learn just the values for me is just, togetherness and integration, acceptance. And part of that is also accepting myself. So what's truth for me, my authenticity is always a part of, it's always in my mind, basically. Yeah. And working in Austria, that put me, challenged me a little bit, because I was suddenly in a different environment, different language. And I felt for the first time in my life difficulty um, feeling included and allowing myself to belong. So for a minute, I felt when I was in Austria that because of the language, I felt um, difficulty really getting into the field of being really involved in what's going on. However, at the same time, I realized that I didn't allow myself to belong while I was in Austria. And I only realized that when I came back to Singapore. So this has affected the way I see people and I value people. It's also changed the way I work. Yeah.
That's interesting. Lately, in a lot of conversations I've been having, that pair of inclusion and belonging have been coming
Yeah.
up. And that's interesting. So
Yeah.
I'm also wondering, in all of this history of yours, if a particular event or a set of circumstances, I mean, you've mentioned your family composition and nationality and identities, um, but is there a particular event or a set of circumstances that you would say has really shaped you or marked you in some way?
Mm. Many events in my life have shaped me. I can remember things like, simple things like going to school. Um, I don't know, maybe because I was from a very my family was never also really in a social group, I think. Maybe that's not true. My parents were really sociable. I don't know, somehow when I went to school, it felt like a shock for me. I was not, I remembered myself not being able to understand how to make friends or what to do with people when I was a kid. I think maybe because I was, being born in the end of the year, my friends in kindergarten were like a year older almost, and they kind of knew how to play. And I remember that time was like, still today was like, it's just I still remember there's been utter confusion. And I was in the kindergarten where people spoke a certain kind of dialect, a Chinese dialect, which I didn't understand. So that was still today impacted me because there's a shock of being in a group and being looked at and not being able to understand what was being said. And mind you, I was not overseas, I was in Singapore, so it was strange. It was still a strange experience for me. And then just as I was getting used to being in school and being a teenager, then I go to Austria, and to realize that suddenly things feel the same again. I'm in this group of people who are speaking a different language, and then trying to find my way into the group and just trying not to belong at the same time, willingly. Um, and I think what really shaped me was during my stay in Austria, I felt so isolated that I decided to go to a workshop. Actually, I didn't decide. It was a friend of mine who was a Singaporean who knew that I was living in Austria, who knew Claudio Naranjo and his set workshop, right? And this friend of mine, being a Singaporean who's never been in Europe, he was kind of afraid to drive to this place called Zist in South Germany, in Bavaria, for this workshop. So he said to me, "Oh, let's come to this workshop. It's going to be fun. Claudio Naranjo is going to teach us about the anagrams. You're going to learn something." So I said, "Okay, since I'm just living in Austria, I'll just drive you to this place." And I ended up in one of Claudio Naranjo's workshop, not knowing that it was a kind of a Gestalt thing. I've never been in therapy before. And I go to this place with 70 over people, where we were going to stay there for like almost 2 weeks. And I thought that we were going to go for this course where we were going to learn about the anagrams. And it was a shock because it was
that's
day in, day
not
out.
a normal course.
It was day in, day out. Gestalt therapy, psychodrama. And I mean, for someone who has not been in therapy before, it was really a shock. And to be among 70 different other people from different nationalities, who people I didn't know. And that workshop was run in 3 languages. So there were people who spoke German and French and English, and many of us didn't know either one of these languages. So it was amazing. It was psychodrama, and nobody knew what was happening. And I came out of that workshop totally different. Like, I didn't know what happened to me. So that was something.
Yeah, that sounds like it made an impact.
It was something.
So how did you end up liking that, or was it kind of scary and then you went back to Gestalt later in a different way, or?
Yeah. I mean, it was so intense. I mean, this is a Gestalt channel, So maybe some Gestalt therapists in this channel might just frown on this work that Claudio Naranjo did. I mean, it was a mix of meditation and psychodrama and you know, group work, lots of group work, big group work, small group work, clown work, and it was just boom, boom, boom all the way. Not boom, boom Gestalt. It was just one program after the next, and we were dealing with our transferences, right? So people were just suddenly getting angry with you, or you know, because they saw their mom, or you know, I saw my dad. So how many times I punched so many guys? You know, this was not really punch, but you know, literally, I mean, acting punch. And I didn't know what I couldn't believe what I saw. I saw the depth of, for the first time in my life, humanity. You know, human nature, humanity. How we can be so sane but not really sane, and how we can really fall apart, and then how we can come back, and how the field, you know, the group supports us, or how the group can break us down. Um, I realized then how I carried my childhood and my past traumas around with me, and how I projected things on people. So I saw that, and and how this group was there to absorb or to contain all those projections and allowed me to see the present moment. And that was the first time I really came back to the present. And that was really, really touching. And how I could get to know people, total strangers, more than I ever knew anybody else. You know, so how we can connect, the power of connection, and that we do not need to have a role or a relationship or an agreement or a commitment to really get to connect to people. And for the first time in my life, all of a sudden I was connecting with 70 over different people. And that was really wonderful. I also connected with myself because I didn't know that I was, about my own childhood. I didn't know. I thought that there was something wrong with me, only to realize that, yeah, my there's something happened to me as a child. Yeah, that I had these traumas. This, you know, my father was kind of paranoid, almost sometimes paranoid, psychotic, and I didn't know that. I thought it was something wrong with me. And I thought that all these years as a teenager, I just decided not to eat because I didn't want to get fat. For example, you know, I didn't know, um, I didn't know that. I knew that I was anorexic for a while. I didn't know that it was not because of looking better. I didn't know that I felt hatred until this workshop. I didn't even feel. I mean, when there was a program where they worked on the concept of shame. How do you feel shame? And I sat and I stood there and I said, no, I don't feel any shame. What
Yeah,
the hell is that?
that's usually a scary part. Is I
Yeah,
don't feel it, but there's so much of it there.
yeah, yeah. So I was like, I don't, I don't feel shame. And then why is everybody crying? You know, why is everybody screaming, right? And it's interesting how that group got me in touch of this feeling of shame, right? And it was like a sudden coming home for me, and I'm feeling really touched right now. Finally coming home for me is that, yeah, wow, you know, I'm suddenly in touch with myself, and I think this has shaped the way I am right now, because now for me, shame, um, especially shame and loneliness and helplessness, um, are like friends. they're painful and they are still friends. They are kind of there. And the way I connect now is through these emotions. Um, yeah. So that was the the event, and it was not only one workshop. They had like a workshop every year for 2 or 3 years, and we had 4 workshops, and then we ended it. So it was, yeah. So it was me in contact with basically these emotions and with another person's emotions, and being okay with it.
It's like that depth that comes out of the authentic
Right.
presence and just being with everything that you have, which is things that we don't normally admit that we have or don't even know that we have.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
I didn't feel it. I just didn't feel shame. That was unbelievable. And um, yeah, and interestingly, I even changed the way I walked and moved. I used to be really fast. Like I would I would only run to, like, if I were to take an escalator up, I wouldn't stand on the escalator, I would run up. And I would move really quickly, and all of a sudden that stopped. And even the eating disorder, ruminating thoughts. I mean, I kind of got over the eating disorder 20 years already before that, but something still remained, like this ruminating thought about how much I eat and calories, this kind of stuff. It suddenly just stopped. And
The
then I
deeper layer,
realized,
like the roots, were still there.
right, right, this remnants of, maybe open Gestalt, this remnants of these thoughts. Suddenly I realized they were not there anymore. The urge to dash was not there anymore. And it's really an embodied change. And then I realized that I cannot keep it to myself anymore, but I didn't know what to do with it. Um, so after these workshops, naturally I would come back to my home, my family. I mean, I'm married, and everybody seemed different. Like I came back to Singapore, and I just felt more disintegrated at the same time. So I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this? And so I started reading Pearls, because there was Gestalt, um, and then I'm listening to this words that says, Gestalt is like waking up from a nightmare. I don't know who said it. Was it Polster? I'm
I
not good at
don't
remembering.
remember.
Yeah, it's like waking up from a nightmare. So I woke up from a nightmare, but then to come to a society where people are still sleeping. So then I felt myself, but then I didn't feel integrated again. And I think this loneliness, or this non-integration, drove me to want to do something. And so yeah, I started connecting with one person after the next
Mhm.
within my community. And then I sought out the summer residential with Gatla,
Okay.
because I was in Austria, and that time Gatla was in Croatia. So they were nice. They accepted me into their basic training.
They are very
And
nice.
yeah, Bob Resnick's Gatla and the summer residentials.
Hmm.
And they accepted me in the train. I didn't expect to be accepted for some reason. I expect them to say, no, you're not a therapist, don't come. But I got accepted, and it was a wonderful experience, very integrated. It was a group that I knew I could go back to every year. Um, then there I got training as a, and the basic group was to teach us how to integrate or how to connect. Doesn't teach us to be therapists, but we learn to connect through dialogue. I think that was really important for me. And a couple of years after joining Gatla, I decided to really train as a therapist. And then I had a dilemma again because there was no psychotherapy training in Singapore,
Uh-huh.
let alone Gestalt training. All the trainings that we had, and I was living in Austria, so everything was going to be in German. That was a problem.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like a lot, but I just want to pause for one second
Yeah.
and ask, out of all of these people that you've met inside and outside of Gestalt and
Mm,
other parts of your life, is there a particular person who you would say, I mean, you say that the groups are really impactful, and I agree with that. I love group dynamics. I think it's amazing.
yeah.
But is there one person who stands out as a significant influence who you did manage to feel a connection with?
Um, I yeah. There were many people. I think they were mostly the therapists that have impacted me. I mean, I never met in my life more in my vision back then, my point of view back then. I've never met more compassionate, um, loving human beings before I met Claudio and his group of Gestalt therapists, and that is something for me. Let me clean my camera.
The
Something
sun
for
is
me,
coming out behind you.
yeah, it's something for me was a shock because I was so used to commercial life. I mean, I was in business. I was in corporate life and business before I went to Austria, and I only knew before then harshness from people. Um, it's like people making use of me for something.
Oh,
I only knew harsh things. Even I mean, I'm Roman Catholic, and I spent a lot of time in church, and even in church, I only felt non-acceptance, right? And whenever I was in groups, I normally felt bad about myself most of all. So for the first time in my life, literally in that group with this Gestalt therapist and Claudio, I felt different. I felt, hey, I'm okay, um, I'm perfectly okay. And that was impactful. And I would say these guys as a group and Claudio, I connected with Claudio's honesty. I mean, on the one hand, he was treated like a guru. Sorry, clean my camera again. On the one hand, he was treated like a guru. On the other hand, you could see his humanity, his loneliness, and he was someone I could like go to and say, Claudio, I could see your loneliness. I could see your longing when you were looking at this film about Tibet, for example. And for the first time, I could sit with a human being and just sit there and say nothing. And yeah, and he was someone who was so respected and by his followers, groups. And yet he was so human. And then I realized that I never met another human all my life. And back then I was already 40.
oh,
And then there were these other therapists in his group. There were like 6 or 7 per workshop. And they were so skillful that I until today I really couldn't believe it. I couldn't imagine how in tune they were with me and with my friends in the group. Yeah, so and they really inspire me. I mean, like I keep telling my husband, I want to be a therapist just like Antonio or Paulo or Cynthia. You know, these people are so inspirational to me because they were so in touch and so connected. Yeah, yeah.
So those are some of the people. And can I ask just, this is probably one of the last more personal questions. I do
Mhm.
want to ask a bit about the work that you have done with all of this. But in a specific way, how do you understand and experience yourself as a woman or within your gender after all of this being in the world with people?
Yeah, and that's changed for me. You know, in the beginning, before this event happened, I didn't really dig. I mean, I like the fact that I'm a woman. At the same time, I kind of, because I was an artist. I'm an artist as well, and I felt that I had to um, erase my gender identity or my identity as a woman in my work. And there was a point, and even when I was in my first job, right, I felt like I had to fight for for positions. Even in my first job, in my first job I was working as a microbiologist in Singapore Airlines for the airline caterer, and I was told during the interview or before the interview that they don't employ women into this job because blah 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 is so difficult and it's shift work and you know blah 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 and um, something about me that I fought it, right? So I managed to get the job by, and I remember doing this by wearing a dress, a pink dress, to the interview, doing that, you know, and
Sounds very rebellious.
yeah, yeah. But it's kind of now I would judge myself poorly on doing that, but back then as a 23-year-old, I would wear a pink dress to the interview, and I got the job straight away. And it was actually a job for a duty manager, but because I was a woman, I was given a job as a microbiologist, right? So this guy, this boss, was really a nice guy. He was a really wonderful guy. He he says, "You're gonna get a job anyway. Who's the microbiologist now? Oh, it's Jack. Okay, let's give her his job." So I got the position in that company, and then it didn't stop me from wanting to be a duty manager because I kind of knew that girls don't get that job as a duty manager. So I fought my way, you know, like I worked as a microbiologist for a year
Hmm.
and said, no, I want to work as a duty manager now.
Hmm.
And then what they said to me was, no, we don't have uniforms for girls to work as a duty manager. You know, you got to go around the airport, blah, blah, blah. So I said, I designed my own uniform. So I
Wow.
got the job.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of challenge and a lot of
Yeah.
like
So
push
that's
from
my,
you.
yeah, that's my
Hmm.
first experience as my hurdle as a woman in my career. And I also came from an all girls school. I studied in a convent school, in a Catholic school, but they were all women. So we had a different mindset. We grew up differently. We grew up thinking that okay, like there's only women in this world. It's a convent school run by nuns.
But there was no competition with men because there weren't any.
There was any.
Everything.
Yeah. So we had girls who were like girls, feminine girls, and then guys, girls. So we kind of like were kind of fluid, right? We were an all girls school, and I was in an all girls school for 10 years. Then I was 16, right? So it never occurred to me that there were certain jobs for men and certain jobs for women. So when I came to the working world, it just made no sense. But still, it affected me. I still had to fight and do things like wear pink dress to work. And then when I changed job, was the same thing happened again. No, they won't take you as a regional sales manager because you're a woman. They need a guy to do this job because you need to travel to Vietnam or to don't know where in Southeast Asia, and it's so dangerous. So I got that job as well. And then big deal, we traveled to Vietnam. So what? Yeah.
It looks
So
like you came back okay. I mean, you seem
yeah,
to be fine.
I came back okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So it's not big things, it's small things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, and then what happens with this when you meet the psychotherapy world and Gestalt?
Yeah. Then
How does that experience of yourself change?
then um I began to really embrace being a woman, you know. Um yeah, I really began to embrace being a woman. It's like I don't see anymore that the the world is against, like in the past I would say that this man and woman thing, but now somehow I see more harmony in this. It's like a dance, like a tango. I push you, you push me. I don't see it as conflict. I see it as us trying to, what Bob Resnick would say, to get to meet ourselves in difference. Yeah. So the narrative is the same, but I see it differently. I see that whole experience differently. It was not that they didn't accept women. It was that they were trying to figure out how men are different from women. So it's men and women trying to feel each other out to see how different we are. And I think I'm more embracing of the difference than trying to be the same or trying to be fluid in that sense. So gender fluidity makes sense to me. At the same time, I'm also more appreciative of differences. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense. So, the other thing that I do want to ask about is after you've had all of this happening to the different parts of you, what did you do with it in your work?
Okay. Um, I began to appreciate better literally differences, and like watching you with your little boy, um, I really began also to appreciate motherhood, or not being a mother myself. So I'm a very good position to say I appreciate motherhood. Um, I feel personally working with clients now who are mothers of young children that motherhood is not given enough respect. Um, why I'm saying this is because in Singapore, I'm working, my office is near the financial district. So I work with corporate people, business women, lawyers, especially financial consultants. And many of them are young mothers. And I'm experiencing with them that, it's almost a torment um, to balance their work life with their motherhood. And the inability for people around to understand or be compassionate for this being torn between wanting to embrace motherhood and being obligated to do a job. Um, and very often this inability to appreciate their motherhood comes from the mothers themselves. So it's changed my way of seeing motherhood, actually, because I'm not a mother myself, so I didn't have this experience of being torn. Um, in fact, when I was a kid, I my own mother had two younger children. So when I was a teenager, my mother gave birth to two younger children, and I really resented it um, for years, for years, and I thought, oh, what a inconvenience, because it was so. I mean, when my siblings came, my whole life changed. The family kind of fell apart. It didn't get better. It fell apart because there was so much stress. And me being a teenager, struggling through my own issues, I kind of blamed it all on my mother's pregnancy and my brother and sister coming along. And it was from then till now, right? It's like a journey. It's like a very long climb up a very high mountain to finally appreciate and respect and really, really, I say appreciate is too small a word, to really value motherhood, the coming of a child and the bond and the nurturing, and yeah, so yeah, and to be now in the position where these are the clients that I really feel really connected to now, and as if I'm like sharing their space, and validating their experiences. Um, yeah, and sometimes even validating their experience more than they dare to validate their own experience. Yeah, so that's a
It's
very long.
actually it's very special to hear that because in the version that we publish, people don't see, my kids coming and going and interrupting and being
Wonderful.
kids. They're not interrupting us, they're just living their lives. But
Yeah,
as a mother, hearing someone who doesn't have children and sees that and is, I don't really know you. I've met you twice. This is like
yeah,
you're like a magical unicorn being an independent adult woman, and
yeah,
then just hearing what you just said, I feel seen, and it's very meaningful. I can imagine how that must impact the working world that you're in
yeah,
and the balance with your
yeah.
clients.
The little boy that showed up, he
He's here.
and he came up just at the right time, and we were talking about gender.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he's so special. I mean, really, so sweet. And what I see in this little child's acting up is, and I always say to my mother clients that you are the most important person in this person's life, and there's no doubt about it, right? And not even the father can can claim that. I mean, when I say that in groups, the men get all upset, and I said, too bad. No matter what happens, it's the mom.
It's different.
Uh, yeah, and why I say that also is because 90% or 99% of clients who come in who have emotional issues, right? I mean, no matter how aggressive or mean or how bad the father was, it was always the mother that impacted them the most. Yeah, so I always say to the moms, you won't believe it, but you are the most important person in their lives, and the most important thing for the child, for your child, is that you are well, is that you are good, right? Um, that's all the child needs to know, that mom is there, mom is healthy, and mom is good, and then they'll be okay too. So yeah, So when I see your little boy, I say, so she's the most important person in this life.
You know, mom's trying to work, maybe, but that's really actually not the most important thing for me normally. So it's a balance.
Yeah.
It's a difficult balance. So
Yeah.
that's part of your work, but I'm also wondering. I mean, you've talked about a lot of challenges in your personal life, in
Mm.
moving and in adapting. Yeah, casi termino. Here we go again. Until I try to talk to somebody else. Um, Dame 2 segundos para hacer una pregunta. So the question is whether in all of this moving and in setting yourself up and finding your own work, do you also feel like you're part of a Gestalt community? Is that like a major part of your identity? Or
Mm.
where does it fall in your life? What is it for you?
Mm. Um, Gestalt is I don't know the meaning of the word community because I'm really not a community person. My inherent sense of not belonging. However, I feel a bond with the Gestalt community as a field. I think when I whatever I do, whatever I however I work, um, I'm true to being loyal to this field. I think for me loyalty is really important because especially now being in Singapore because there aren't many Gestalt therapists in Singapore. I think I know of only one or two who are my dear friends and nobody else and even and then as I'm looking for my ground here, having just moved back, um, I had to engage into with two supervisors um, who are living in Australia, right? And it's for me so important to to reach out to Gestalt therapists and Gestalt friends so that I can find my ground. So yeah, I'm really loyal to Gestalt therapy, um, and that defines how I work. Um, I know I'm also aware that there's so many differences with different groups of Gestalt therapists because I've met the Naranjo group, I've met the Bob Resnick group very intimately. I know them really well. I'm also trained in Vienna, so I'm also with the Vienna group, the IGEWIN, all really different in ideology. I mean, in the way they operate, in the thinking, in the technique. But I believe that there's a thread that runs through to which is this the need to connect and to accept and to be intimately, you know, touching the differences. I think that is true for me, and that feels really inclusive. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, I've noticed that
yeah,
in all of these conversations, it's a particular set of abilities of a Gestalt person, regardless
yeah,
of where they trained. It's that ability to be present and the willingness to connect, even though there's difference, and even to be
yes,
curious about the differences sometimes.
yes,
So
and
I am wondering what's next for you? Like, what are you doing or developing, and what do you think from your, I would say, very unique perspective? What do you think could be next for Gestalt?
um, what is in it for me? What is next for me is I thought I knew that when I came back to Singapore. I thought I was going to do my PhD um, in psychotherapy research, in Gestalt research, to create, this a video, uh, to create material that describes how therapy works. Stuff, this fanciful stuff, but I thought I was going to do that, and now it's changed somewhat during the COVID time, and because my practice has got really busy, and I'm beginning to see a need is beginning to emerge out of this field. Yeah, I mean, I did last week like almost 50 hours client work, and there's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I don't. This whole idea of doing a PhD and it's kind of diminished, and I'm seeing something emerge in the field, which is something really cultural. Something needs to be done, and I don't know what. Um, to help people or to help us manage cultural differences, to manage old culture and new culture. Um, in particular, in Asia, to manage, we have three main Asian cultures in Singapore, which is the Chinese, Indians, and Malays. So, and among these three groups, we have Christianity, we have Hinduism for the Indians, we have Islam. In the Chinese, we have Buddhism, Taoism, and Christianity, basically. And we have the modern day people. We have the modern families, and then we are families that are bounded by really strict traditions, and this is causing something. And I'm seeing it in my practice in Singapore, which I never saw when I was in Austria. Maybe I never was alert to it, but here I see it. Like, for example, the topic of filial piety. I'm not sure if people are aware of it. The Chinese, the Confucius idea of filial piety, where you respect your parents no matter what. And I'm seeing it as something that I'm beginning to see as something that belonged to a time that doesn't really fit in today's modern Asian family. And I'm also seeing how it's causing disconnect, or it has caused disconnect. I'm also seeing things that something that I never saw before in Singapore, which is war trauma. I mean, Singapore was taken over by the Japanese, occupied by the Japanese in World War II, while the world was aware of Nazi occupation in Germany. People forget that in Southeast Asia, we were also occupied by the Japanese, and we were brutally tortured by the Japanese in the occupation. And my grandparents lived through that, and my father was born in that time. Um, that is something that I wasn't aware of as a young person, but I'm beginning to be more aware of now, and how it's affected me and affecting the generations of my parents and this generation we have now. So these are the things that are beginning to emerge for me, and I'm not sure if I will ever be capable enough to write something or to create a kind of a dialogue about this. So that's probably my
Mhm.
plan for.
But you're noticing it and you're working
I'm
with it,
noticing it.
and
Yeah,
that's
I'm
incredible.
letting the field lead me in that sense. Yeah. And for
That's
Gestalt, yeah,
mhm.
for Gestalt therapy, I think we need to grow here. There are not enough Gestalt therapists in Singapore. So
I don't think the two of you can do everything.
no, no, that's the thing. Julie is the other person. Julie and I, we kind of like are trying to get together. We don't even have time. And well, since I'm online, whoever wants to come to Singapore, please call me. I need
You're going to be
company.
surprised.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, what do you think Gestalt should do? What should it do, or what could it do?
Produce more readable, assimilable material on what Gestalt therapy is and can do, like what we're doing here. Um, you know, call it marketing as it may, but sometimes we need that. We need awareness. We need to speak more about what Gestalt therapies can do and is done for us. Um, because there's so much out there. There's so much material out there that, yeah, that's unfortunate. And then we have Gestalt therapy that nobody really, people still ask what is that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think. We need more presence, basically presence. Yeah,
I agree. I agree, and I
yeah.
appreciate your answer. So, is there anything else that you would like to add right now about
Um,
yourself? Any final thoughts or?
ah, no, I think, yeah, I think, yeah, I'm really grateful for being here. Yeah, and yeah, I'm really grateful for being here, and thank you for inviting me. And it was great
Thank
that your
you.
little boy. Hello,
Thank you. He wants to say goodbye. ¿Le quieres decir adiós?
hello.
Sí.
Oh, goodbye.